welcome to another episode of Blues in the Basement. I'm Jay Stulo, and today I wanted to talk about the really important concepts of bending and vibrato. So, more important than scales, more important than learning to play fast, more important than music theory, is the ability to sound musical. Right? To sound like you have mastery of your instrument means you need to sound like you have control. And in blues, bending is a big part of most styles of blues. There are, some swing blues and jump blues. Those guys put monster strings on and they maybe bend a half step because they're not really into that thing. But definitely, if you're talking about Chicago blues or Memphis blues, Texas blues, bending is a big part of that. It's really important to be accurate when you're bending your notes. You're not just bending them for an effect, you're playing music. So let's say we're in E, right? That E pentatonic minor scale. All right, so you can bend every note in that scale. But the trick is you need to know where you're bending it to, right? So when you're bending a note up, which is, really your only option. That's not entirely true, but let's just say for the most part it is. You are bending that note to a pitch. You're just playing a note. So let's start with this note. It's probably the first note you want to learn to bend and control. So when I bend this note, I'm bending from here to here, which is really this note. Just playing two notes out of the scale. I don't want to miss that bend and play the wrong pitch. Ooh, hurts. Ooh, ouch. Right? So you want to be accurate and bend that note to this note. And one of the surest signs you can tell somebody hasn't been playing for a long time or hasn't put in enough practice time is if they just have sour bends, if they miss. Ooh, So, the other aspect, and there are some guitar players who I think make a choice not to use vibrato. I don't understand that choice. For me, I just don't like the way that sounds. If you hit a note and it just sits there, don't like that. So you want to make it sing, right? So it's done with a subtle bend, where you're rocking it back and forth very subtly. And that depends on that's a personal style. Some people will use a wider vibrato. Some will use like a shaky kind of vibrato, which comes from classical guitar. Some will bend by pushing it this way. Others will bend the vibrato by pulling it that way. Hard to do on the first string, right? You go right off the edge. So vibrato takes a lot of time to develop one that works for you. And it does become sort of like a signature. So that's a vibrato on a regular sustained note. Which you definitely, you don't want to leave your notes just sitting there. If you play like a nice phrase, and then you end it with a note that just hangs there, you're missing an opportunity to play something, musical with the vibrato. So that's on a note that you're just sustaining. It's also important when you bend a note, if you're going to hold that pitch, you're going to want to apply vibrato to that as well. That has the same problem as this. It just sits there. So what you want to do is apply that same idea to make it sing a little bit. You're applying vibrato to any note that you bend and sustain. The speed at which you use that vibrato. You know, maybe you can do a slower one or a fast. It really depends on your approach. One thing that's critically important is it has to be even. So I'm bending up to this pitch, and then what I'm doing is slowly releasing it. So, and it goes back up. It sounds a little when you do it slowly, but that's really the vibrato effect you're getting when you bend a note, is you're letting that pitch go down just a tiny bit and then putting it right back. This is the part that takes practice, because you want to do it so it goes down the same amount each time. And when you put it back, you don't want to go past it. See that? That doesn't sound musical. It sounds awful. So that's what takes the practice. Using your ears to get that. So a lot of folks, when they use that kind of vibrato, a lot of guitar players, a lot of people, when we do that, you actually see the neck of our guitar shake. And there's nothing wrong with that. Sometimes it's the only way you're going to get that sound. It's important to keep a firm grip with your thumb, so you've got some leverage, so your guitar doesn't, fly away from you there. If you were trying to do that without your thumb, you're going to get a lot less control. All right, so the thing that you want to be careful with is that you're using even vibrato. And almost as bad as no vibrato at all is a quivery sort of vibrato. It's a weird one. You'll hear a lot of people, you can tell, who haven't worked on their vibrato end up with like a little weird little wide vibrato that's a little strange. Where I hear that the most is, let's say we're going to do, instead of a bend, to this note we do a slide. Putting vibrato on the root note, if you're doing a quirky little fast one, it's the problem with that is you end up kind of doing that, and that's not a good note, right? That's pushing like a quarter step sharp of your root note. It's hard on the ears. So that's a note especially you want to be very careful with keeping a nice even vibrato. Okay, so that's a little bit about vibrato. Oversimplified, and there are different vibratos for everybody. You find your own personal style, but it's something you should definitely pay attention to, something you should work at, and kind of, even if you've been playing for a long time, it doesn't hurt to look at the vibrato you're currently using and sort of analyze that and find out what is it you're doing. I know for me, I use a different vibrato depending on which finger I'm playing. So my first finger vibrato is a little wider, and I actually use like a little circle motion. It's a little, when I analyzed it, I realized what I was doing. And it was different. I discovered. So once I knew that I was doing something a little bit different, that gave me options, right? So I could play this note and do like a, but then if I could do like a note where I play and put this vibrato, and I choose to use my first finger instead, I'll get a different sort of sound. All three of those have a slightly different sound. And once you become aware of that, it gives you some different options to work with. All right, so let's look at what notes you can bend. Okay, all of them. But you want to know where you're bending them to. So let's go up to the first string. So this note, you're bending to that note. This is one that I see guitar players misbend this a lot, as beginners especially. And the tension on the first string is the highest tension, typically on a guitar. So this is the hardest one to bend of the standard notes you would bend. So when sometimes you see guitar players actually, like, before they bend the note, you can tell that they're muscling up to do it, right? If this note is hard for you to bend, and especially if you've been playing a while and it's hard to do, make sure you're using all 3 fingers to reinforce that, so you're not just trying to push with the strength of 1, right? You want to have 3 that are pushing. Your thumb should be here to help push against something. And if you've been playing a while and you still have a hard time bending that to pitch, you might be using strings that are too heavy for you. So the whole, heavy string controversy, right? There's this notion that if you use really heavy strings, you'll get a better tone. And then some people believe if you use lighter strings, you'll get a better tone. What I believe is you should use the strings you can control, right? So you can slap a set of 13 through 70s on your guitar, and if your hands can do that, and you can play those bends well, and you have controlled vibrato, and you're not shredding the meat off your finger, by all means, go for it. If you can't, then don't do that. Use 9s if you have to. It's better to use 9s and be able to control your playing and sound like music than it is to put, 11s or 12s or 13s or suspension cables from the Golden Gate Bridge on your guitar and sound awful, right? Or get fatigued after your first guitar solo, you're shot for the night because your hands can't do that all night. Use what you can comfortably control. I use 10s most of the time. I use heavier strings on my slide guitars. Every once in a while, I'll have a guitar set up for slide, and then I'll decide I'm going to try to play it as a straight guitar, and I'll end up playing, a Strat with 12s on it. And my band tunes down half step. And it's hard. I can do it, but if I listen back to the tapes, it doesn't sound quite as controlled. So I like to use 10s. And I'll use 11s on like Gibson-style guitars because they have a shorter scale length. So, use strings that you can deal with, right? There's no shame in using 9s or 8s. B.B. King used 8s. Billy Gibbons from ZZ Top used 8s. And huge tone. Not a problem, right? So use... it's not a sign of weakness. It's not a badge of honor to use 13s and, pull the meat off your finger and shred your fingernails. Not a badge of honor. So, all right. Notes that you can bend. Any note in a scale you can bend. And the trick is you're going to bend a note to the next note. This one, if you're going to bend that note in the key of E, you have to bend it, if you want to stay pentatonic, all the way up to here. If you want to try to do that, I would recommend not using your first finger to get from here to here. You can do it, but I can feel the meat coming off my finger. So if I'm going to do that, which I usually wouldn't bend it at that point, I would actually use my second finger or my third finger to get that up to pitch. So I have some reinforcements there. All right, then this one. You're really bending from here to there. This one, once again, you're bending, it's a step and a half. You can do it with your first finger, but you'll notice that when I do that, my third string is sliding right over the top of my finger and cutting into the cuticle. So it hurts a little, and I've built up some calluses to deal with that. But once again, you could choose to use your third finger, just move down to get it, or your second finger. So we covered those notes. So this one, on the third string, once again, you're bending it up to that note. And then this one, you're bending to that note. And once we get to this note, once again, if you want to bend it, you have to bend it up to that note, so it's a step and a half. Big bend on the D string. Depending on what kind of guitar you're playing, you might not even have enough fretboard to get there. You might go off the edge of the fret. I don't bend that one a lot. Sometimes, but not a lot. That one, you're bending from here to there. So you kind of get the picture, right? That one you're definitely not going to get by going that way, so you might have to bend it this way. But that's a big bend. And if I'm going to bend that note, chances are I'm going to do it somewhere else. So what you can practice is doing... So you actually practice playing those notes straight and then bending to them. If you do this enough over months and years, you just get better at knowing where to bend to. All right, so I'm going to show you one more thing about bending. We've been in this pentatonic minor scale. Let's drop down to the pentatonic minor in E that happens at this position, at the 9th fret and 12th fret. My favorite place to play the pentatonic minor. So, once again, you want to bend these notes, they have to go to a proper note. And it's different than where it was here. So that one has to go all the way up there. So I don't bend that one a whole lot. But if I do, it's easier than it was here because I'm using my 3rd finger. And this note has to go here. So you need to know where your target pitches are. So practice those bends. So once again, now you're on that 1st finger, that's your root note, that's your E, so that becomes a pretty big bend with your 1st finger. So if you don't have the capacity to do that right away, don't do it. You could just choose not to bend that note from that place. The thing that I like to do a lot out of this position, sort of the Albert King approach, is to bend this note up to that note. But then bend it a whole nother step and bend this note to this one. The G string is, I find, the easiest string to bend, and you have enough space to get it on the fretboard to bend it a step and a half or 2 steps. So and there I'm bending it from all the way up to there, and then I'm bending it to here. So classic Albert King, right? Big bends from there all the way up to there. So, I guess to kind of sum that up is when you're bending those notes, you want to make sure you're getting to a pitch. You're not bending it just as an effect. You're playing music. Those are notes, and you should play the right notes. All right, I hope you found that useful. I hope you can make some music out of that. Take a second, if you would, please subscribe to my YouTube channel. You can follow me on Instagram, Facebook, out on my website. I have several other videos. I do 2 or 3 videos every week on mostly guitar, blues-based topics. And if you really enjoyed the video, there is a link to show your support in the description. Thank you very much. See you next time.